Hello students, this is Professor C. Tanuja Bhati from Jain College of Engineering, Belgavi, continuing with revision lecture of Module 3, Time and Value of Supply for subject Indirect Taxation. So today we will be seeing the last part in this module, that is Value of Supply. Moving ahead, under indirect taxation, as we know, 60% is theory, 40% is problems. First, we will be covering those modules where problems are covered. We have already covered module 2 and I have named it as IT problems module 2. Module 3, we have already seen problems on time of supply, place of supply. Today, we will be seeing problems on value of supply and I have named it as IT problems module 3.E. Moving ahead. So today, under time and value of supply, we will be seeing simple problems on value of supply. Now, what is the meaning of value of supply? See, value of supply is covered under section 15 of the GST Act. Now, what is the meaning of value of supply? Value of supply means the value on which GST tax is to be calculated. So value of supply means value shall be the transaction value. Now, whenever there is a transaction taking place, what is going to be the value on which you're going to charge GST? It is always going to be the transaction value. Now, when it is going to be a transaction value? When the below conditions are going to be satisfied. So the first condition is where the supplier and recipient of the supply are not related. When I say not related means they shouldn't be related, like they shouldn't be the directors or office of the same company. They shouldn't have an employer-employee relationship. They shouldn't be a legally recognized partner of a firm. They shouldn't be members of the same family. If they are, then they are said to be related. But the transaction value is to be considered as a value of supply only when the buyer and recipient, that is supplier and recipient of supply, are not related and price is the sole consideration. That is where you're paying the amount, where the recipient is paying the amount to the supplier in the form of a consideration and price has to be the sole consideration. So let us just recap this particular slide, that is value of supply shall always be the transaction value. What is transaction value? Transaction value is the price actually paid or payable when the goods are being sold. Whatever price that you're paying when the goods are being sold is the transaction value. But when we should consider the value as transaction value? Only when two conditions are satisfied. What are the two conditions? Supply and recipient should not be related and price should be the sole consideration for sale. Now let us see ahead. Now we know that the value of supply is the transaction value. Now what all should be included in the transaction value? There are 5 elements that has to be included in the transaction value. In case it is not included, suppose the value is already inclusive all these 5 items, then you need not include. But you have to include all these 5 items in the transaction value while calculating the GST. So let us see the first. Value includes any taxes exception GST taxes. Any taxes exception GST taxes means any other taxes exception IGST, CGST, SGST, composition cess, UTGST, because all that comes under GST taxes. So any other taxes other than GST taxes, like you can say corporation tax, municipal taxes, if those taxes are charged by the supplier, then you have to include it in the transaction value. Second, any amount that the supplier is liable to pay in relation to such supply but which has been incurred by the recipient. See, many a times, let me give you an example. Many a times what happens, the supplier gives the delivery up to the recipient's premises and charges transportation charges. But here the supplier is liable to pay the transporter the transportation charges. But it tells the recipient to pay. So usually that charge is not included in the transaction value. So section 15 says that any expenditure which supplier is liable to pay but it has been paid by the recipient, such expenditure also should be included in the transaction value. Third, incidental expenses. Incidental expenses means the supplier has sold certain goods and after the sale or during the sale or before the sale, the recipient requests for some extra packing. So the packing charges are the incidental charges, or maybe some inspection charges, certification charges. So incidental charges are charges that are during the sale, or not the main sale or not the main expenditure, but the expenditure that are ancillary to the main expenditure, maybe packing charges, certification charges. All those charges or expenses are also to be added in the transaction value. Next, fourth one, interest or penalty for delayed payments. Many a times what happens is the supplier sells the goods to the recipient on certain credit basis. So once the credit period is over, the supplier charges interest for delayed payments. So such interest also has to be included in the transaction value while calculating GST. Fifth one, subsidies received exception government subsidies. Subsidies that are received, but you should not include those subsidies that are received by the government. So by suppose if certain subsidies, I am running an NGO and I am receiving certain subsidies from certain trust, certain institution, or certain institution who are carrying out CSR activities. So if I am receiving such certain subsidies, the value of those subsidies also has to be included in the transaction value. So what has to be included in the transaction value? A quick revision. Any taxes, whatever taxes has been charged by the supplier, okay, exception GST taxes, has to be included in the transaction value. Second, any amount which a supplier is liable to pay but it is paid by the recipient, that amount also has to be included in the transaction value. Third, incidental expenses. Fourth, interest or penalty for the delayed payment that is charged by the supplier from the recipient. And fifth is subsidies received, exception government subsidies. Now there are certain things that has to be excluded from the transaction value. Now what has to be excluded? You have to exclude discounts given. Now whenever any discount is given, please don't include it in the transaction value. But which discounts? When? What discounts? Only those discounts which are given before or at the time of supply. Remember students, discounts have to be excluded from the transaction value, but only and only if such discount is given before or at the time of supply, okay? And even after the supply, if the discount is given, you have to exclude provided two conditions are getting satisfied. Number one, such discount was known when you were entering into the agreement for sale. And second is the input tax credit taken on such discount is being reversed by the recipient of the supply. So let me just read this. Discounts given, but when? Before or at the time of supply, if such discount has been duly recorded in the invoice issued in respect of such supply, and after the supply has been effected, if such discount is established in terms of an agreement entered into at or before the time of such supply, and can be linked to relevant invoices, and input tax credit is attributable to the discount on the basis of the document issued by the supplier, has been reversed by the recipient of the supply. So just remember, discounts have to be excluded from transaction value provided number A, such discounts is given before or at the time of supply. Number 2, if it is given after the supply, also it has to be excluded provided it was entered, such discount was entered, there was an agreement either before or at the time of supply, and they can be linked to a particular invoice. Discount can be linked to a particular transaction or invoice, and ITC has been reversed by the recipient. Now let us take a quick recap of value of supply. Subsection 1, which says that, section 15 subsection 1, which says that value of supply shall be the transaction value. What is transaction value? Price actually paid or payable for the goods that have been sold, provided only supply is between unrelated person plus price is the sole consideration for supply. Now subsection 2 says that what all should be included in the transaction value. So any taxes except this law means GST law. Then any amount by the recipient, paid by the recipient, which the seller is liable to pay and is not included in the price. Incidental expenses at the time or before the supply, interest, late fee or penalty for delayed payment, subsidies linked directly linked to the price excluding provided by government. So all these, if it is already included, no need to include. If it is not included, then you have to include in the transaction value. Subsection 3 is what has to be excluded. Discounts given before or at the time of supply and can be linked to the invoice, and discounts given after supply if it is there in the agreement and ITC has been reversed by the recipient. So this is all about section 15, that is value of supply. If you remember this, based on this we can solve the problems. Now what about if the supply is between related person and price is not the sole consideration for sale? Then obviously the value will not be the transaction value. Then what will be the value? Let us see. Section 15 subsection 4 says that the value cannot be determined because the sale is of between related person and price is not the sole consideration, or maybe supplies of some notified supply. Then the value shall be determined as per the valuation rules, that is value of supply CGST rules chapter 6. There is a separate provisions to determine the value in case the supply is between related persons and price is not the sole consideration of sale. So this you all don't have for your syllabus. But remember, if they are related and if the price is not the sole consideration for sale, value will be determined as per CGST valuation rules chapter 4. So remember, this is not there for your syllabus but just for your knowledge. Now let us see problems on value of supply. Based on what we have seen under section 15 subsection 1, 2 and 3, like what should be the value? Transaction value. What should be included? 5 items. What should be excluded? 1 item, that is discount. So based on this provision, we will be seeing how to solve the problems. Okay. So module 3, time and value of supply, problems on calculation of value of supply. Problem number 1. Mr. A sold a solar panel of rupees 50,000 after adjusting a subsidy of 20,000 received from charitable trust and 16,000 received from central government. What is the transaction value? Now, see, first of all, transaction value is the value that is the price actually paid or payable. So what is the, let us see the solution. Let us find what is the transaction value. So solution is list price of the solar panel is how much? 50,000. And we know that as per section 15 subsection 2, there are certain inclusions in the transaction value. So the fifth inclusion was that any subsidy received has to be included in the transaction value, exception government subsidy. So this is a subsidy that is received from charitable trust. 20,000 is a subsidy that is received from the charitable trust. Therefore, it has to be included. When I say included means it has to be added in the transaction value. When I say excluded, it has to be deducted from the transaction value. So subsidy is received from the charitable trust, you have added. Next, subsidies received from the central government is to be excluded because it has told that subsidies received exception those received from the government. It can be central, it can be state. So subsidies received from the government has to not to be included at all. So you have not included. What is the transaction value? 70,000. Now in working note you can write, as per section 15 subsection 1, transaction value is the value of supply is the transaction value, therefore 50,000 is taken. Next, in the inclusions, that is under section 15 subsection 2, in the inclusions in the fifth point, subsidies received exception those from the government has to be included, therefore 20,000 is included and 16,000 is excluded. Next problem, A Limited has provided following particulars relating to the goods sold by it to B Limited. Now, list price of the goods exclusive of taxes and discounts is 50,000. List price is the price actually paid or payable. So, the transaction value is 50,000. Tax levied by municipal authority on the sale of such goods is 5,000. CGST, SGST chargeable on the goods is 10,440. Packing charges not included in the above price is 1,000 rupees. Okay. A Limited received 2,000 as subsidy from an NGO on the sale of such goods. The price of rupees 50,000 of goods is after considering such subsidy. See, after considering such subsidy means subsidy is a reduction in the value. So the price is after considering means it has already, the subsidy is reduced from the value. A Limited offers 2% discount on the list price of the goods, which is recorded in the invoice for the goods. So determine what is the value of taxable supply. So solution, computation of value of taxable supply. First of all, section 15 subsection 1, value is nothing but the transaction value. So you have taken the transaction value, list price 50,000. Okay. Now let us see section 15 subsection 2. It says that what all has to be included in the transaction value. So what all has to be included? Or first is section 15 subsection 2a. The first thing what it tells what has to be included is all the taxes exception GST taxes. Now taxes levied by municipal authority is not a GST tax, therefore you should include it in the value. So you have to add taxes levied by municipal authority 5,000 included in the value as per section 15 subsection 2a. Next, CGST, SGST chargeable on the goods. We have to not include because it is GST taxes. So we have not included, we have kept it as nil. Third, packing charges not included in the above price. Now packing charges has to be included as per point number C. That is incidental expenses. Packing charges are all incidental expenses. So includable in the value as per section 15 subsection 2 clause C 1000. Next is subsidies. This is an amount after subsidy. So you have to include subsidy. Is subsidy received from the government? No, it is received from NGO. Therefore, you have to include it as per section 15 subsection 2e. Subsidy is received from a non-government body. Since subsidy is received from a non-government body, the same is included in the value. So 2000 is included. So all the inclusions you will add to the transaction value. So 50,000 plus 5,000 plus 1,000 plus 2,000 give you 58,000. Now, discount is something that has to be excluded and it is recorded in the invoice. So therefore you exclude discount and discount is given on the list price. Now what is list price? 50,000. So less discount at the rate of 2% on 50,000. Since discount is known at the time of supply, it is deductible from the value as per section 15 subsection 3 clause A. So deducting 1,000, what is the value of taxable supply? It is 57,000. Next, see if you remember the provisions of section 15 subsection 1, 2 and 3, you can solve any problem. Third one, ABC advertisers conceptualized and designed the advertising campaign for a new product launched by New Moon Private Limited for a consideration of 5 lakh. ABC advertisers owned 20,000 to one of its vendor in relation to advertising service provided by it to New Moon Private Limited. Such liability of ABC was discharged by Moon Private Limited. New Moon Private Limited delayed the payment for consideration and thus paid 15,000 as interest. Assume the rate of CGST at 10%, SGST at 10%. Determine what is the value of taxable supply made by ABC advertisers. So it is very clear that there was a service charge of 5 lakh and there is a sum payment that the supplier is liable to pay, but it was paid by the recipient, and there is a interest in delayed payment that is taken by the recipient from the supplier. So service charges is nothing but the transaction value, so it is 5 lakh. What all should be added in the transaction value? First one is any taxes exception GST taxes, so that is not there here in this problem. Second one is any amount that the recipient supplier is liable to pay, but it is paid by the recipient, so yes, we have one amount. Payment made by New Moon Private Limited to vendor of ABC advertisers, liability of the supplier being discharged by the recipient is included in the value, that is 20,000. Interest on delayed payment also has to be included in the value as per section 15 subsection 2 clause D, 15,000. So what is the total value of taxable suppliers? You have to add. When I say included means you have to add, excluded, minus. So you are adding 5,20,000 and 15,000, you get 5,35,000. Now this is the value on which you're going to charge GST. So CGST at the rate of 10% and SGST at the rate of 10% you have charged. That's it. Next, problem number 4. Compute the value of taxable supply if the contracted value is 10 lakhs and this includes the following. So this 10 lakhs is already including the following. Remember, it is already 10 lakhs is including the following. Cost of packing, so this is incidental charges which is already included. Cost of design and drawing charges, already it is an incidental charges already included. Cost of preventive packing on customers request, already included. Pre-installation, it is an again incidental charges, that is section 15 subsection 2 clause C, already included. Inspection charges 8,000, already included, it is given here, so need not include. If it is included, please don't include. Only if it is not included, then you have to include. Trade discount is already included, that is 2,000. Included means it is deducted, and that is how trade discount is there. Next is additional points is freight charges of rupees 25,000 has been paid by the recipient on behalf of the supplier. Now this is not included because it is additional points and they have not specified that it is included, so we have to assume it is not included. So freight charges 25,000 is paid by the recipient on behalf of supplier, so you have to include it in the value as per section 15 subsection 2 clause D. Next, clause B. Next, 30,000 subsidies received from the charitable trust adjusted in the value. Adjusted in the value means you have deducted. Subsidy is a reduction in the value. So you have deducted this 30,000. Now you have to add it back, right? So is this subsidy received from government? No, it is received from some charitable interest. So you have to add it back. 20,000 subsidy received from the central government adjusted in the value. So obviously you have to exclude it, and it is adjusted in the value means that subsidy amount is already reduced from the value. You need not give any adjustment to this. So let us see the solution. Computation of taxable value of supply of goods. Contracted value of supply is 10 lakhs. Items to be included as per section 15 subsection 2. You need not include anything till here because it is already included. Freight charges, you are including 25,000. Subsidies from charitable trust 30,000. So total taxable value of goods is, you have 10 lakhs plus 25,000 plus 30,000, that is 10 lakhs 55,000. Next, you can have working note, like notes as to why you have included or excluded a particular item that is given in the problem. So note 1, cost of packing and preventive packing on customer's request shall be included in determining the value of taxable supply, as it is already included in the contracted value, hence no further adjustment is required. Note number 2, amount charged from recipient for anything done by the supplier before or at the time of delivery of goods should be included in the value of taxable supply, as it is already included in the contracted value, hence no further adjustment is required. Note 3, value of supply doesn't include any discount which is given before or at the time of supply if such discount is duly recorded in the invoice issued for such supply, as it is already deducted, hence no adjustment is made. Note 4, Any amount that the supplier is liable to pay in relation to the supply but has been incurred by the recipient should be included in the value of supply, since freight charges incurred by the recipient on the behalf of supplier shall form part of taxable value. Note 5. Value of supply includes subsidies directly in relation to the price, excluding subsidies received from the central or state government. Therefore, we have included it. So, we are done with the problems on value of supply. Remember, you can solve these problems provided in your section 15, subsection 1, 2 and 3. Thank you, students. We have completed module 3, time and value of supply completely. In our next module, in our next video lecture, we will be seeing module number 5, where we will be seeing problems on calculation of valuation of importation duty. Thank you.